Welcome. Hello, everyone. Good to see you streaming in from the waiting room. Welcome, welcome. We're excited today for a fascinating talk. We've been chatting with Dr. Mata here while we're getting ready and thrilled to hear about his work and learn more. Before we do that, we have some housekeeping to share with you. Um, Everyone will be placed in mute, and your communication line to us is going to be the chat function. So, to get started and do a little practice, I always like to ask everyone to put in the chat where they are tuning in from, where in the country or where in the world are you tuning in from. Great benefit of Zoom, right? We can connect from all corners of the globe. So, would love to have you put that in the chat. And then we have a new function as well today. We have either a transcript, closed captions, or subtitles are available. I'm going to turn it over to Rebecca to just explain how to either turn that on or off.
So for everyone who is on a computer, if you are not seeing the subtitles and would like to see them, or you see them and you'd like to turn them off, you should notice in the bar at the bottom, it should say live transcript, and it has two CCs and a little icon. So go ahead and you'll just click on that, and it'll give you a couple of options. One of them, if you're seeing subtitles, it'll say hide subtitles if you want to hide them, or if you want to view them, it'll say show them. And then also, if you would like to see the full transcript, you can just click full transcript as well. So that's how you can turn those on or off. If you do have trouble, feel free, you can just email us at info@pmdalliance.org, and we can help for future programs. We'll get that sorted for you.
Okay, well, now you know how to send questions, how to read and hear what's going on. Let's get started. So, on behalf of Parkinson and Movement Disorder Alliance, I'd like to introduce our amazing neurologist facilitator, Dr. Indu Subramanian. So, Dr. Subramanian, take it away.
All right, well, thank you. We continue to be, unfortunately, physically distanced, but socially connecting in this way. And, as you know, I'm kind of I've become a little bit of a loneliness expert, even though, it wasn't something that I'd planned to do, but, really passionate about trying to get people to connect. And I'm so excited to have you connect with us here. This is part of what we call social prescribing these days. And we're trying to connect in more and more places and talk about more and more important topics and topics that we haven't really had a chance to get into. And so I'm just so excited to have Ignacio Mata on. Dr. Mata is an amazing genetics expert who joins us from the Cleveland Clinic. And he has originally from Spain, Oviedo, Spain, which is where he got his Ph.D. And then he came out here. He was in the Mayo Clinic. He's been in Seattle and then ended up in the Cleveland Clinic, and has been doing some really amazing research on genetics of populations in Parkinson's that may not normally be participating in research. And so there's a huge push, I think, with COVID and a lot of the issues with disparities and unmet needs in communities that we've really been, I think, unraveling through the last year and facing to really realize that I think so much of our research is so focused historically on very niche populations. So, largely male, largely Caucasian, largely certain age groups, I guess mid 60s is sort of the average age group, and married, affluent, sort of men who are Caucasian. So it is an important group. I love that group. I see a lot of those patients at the VA, but certainly it does not account for everyone in the world, in the country. And so we're really trying to dig deep and find out why we are not able to recruit these populations. And I think we'll understand why, genetics matters for all of us, as we try to figure out how to solve the mysteries of Parkinson's disease. So, and not just dealing with the pure genetics, he's working with a lot of other outreach in various sort of populations, and we'll learn about that journey too. So, Nacho, I think you're muted actually, so maybe we'll get you to unmute and tell us maybe a little bit about your journey and how you came to Cleveland and not Cincinnati, and what made you passionate about this area of Parkinson's study.
Sure. So I'm a molecular biologist by training, so I'm not a neurologist, although I love neurology and I love seeing patients. So I studied biology, got really interested in genetics from from early on in college, and then I had the opportunity to start working with Parkinson's disease. Actually, I was telling Indu the other day that the way I started was really cool because my first grant was actually paid by patients, so it was something very rare. It was the first time in Spain where patients from a disease actually decided to create their own fellowship and pay somebody to do research on their own disease, because this was early 2000s. There was not any money to study genetics of Parkinson's disease because nobody believed that it was genetic. So the patients said, well, we want somebody to research this area. So they pay me. And from then on, I created this huge bond with the patients. And I kind of see you all as my bosses, right? So I'm working for you. I'm trying to understand the disease better and obviously translate everything that we know into the clinic for, better care and, hopefully one day, meeting the goal of ending it or at least slowing it so people are not affected by it. So yeah. And yeah, as you said, I was in Jacksonville, Florida, the Mayo, doing my PhD. Then I went to do my postdoc, and I became an assistant professor at the University of Washington in Seattle. And 3 years ago, by coincidence, I came here to give a talk, and they were looking for a neurogeneticist, and they made me an offer that I couldn't resist. So I ended up moving myself and my entire family to Ohio, and we've been really happy since then. But I wanted to thank you and PMD Alliance for inviting me today to be here.
No, we're excited. You have a great team there too. So I think, together, us clinicians and you in the lab and, the patients, we can all work together to really make some important differences. So we're excited to have you. So maybe, I know, Ignacio, you had prepared a talk for us just to give us a background of what you do, because it is a bit complicated. So we'd love to sort of have you share that, and then we can kind of get into some question and answer after that.
Yeah, let me put my pointer in here. Yeah. All right, you guys see the slides?
Yep, perfect.
Perfect. Yeah, so this is something that I really enjoy talking about. I think most of my career has been studying or improving diversity in genetic research. So every time I get invited to talk about this, I always say yes, because it is very important to me. And I won't talk about this, but I'm involved in almost every single diversity thing that is going on at the Cleveland Clinic. All the groups, all the initiatives that are going on here, I try to be involved and be a voice for those that are underrepresented and underserved. So I think Indu did a great introduction, because actually, as you see, my first slide was showing how if you Google Parkinson's disease, this is what it comes up with. This is the first image of a patient, which is, again, an all white male individual. And I love this paper from a few years ago, well, actually from a year ago, from our friends at the University of Florida, that they said that it is time for a change. Not all patients are like that. We have young patients, we have female patients, we have, African Americans, we have Hispanics. It affects everybody, right? So this lack of diversity is really kind of inherited to the field from even how we perceive disease. And there's a lot of studies that have shown that women or people of color, Latinos, they get diagnosed sometimes later, because a lot of clinicians don't think that what they have is Parkinson's disease, because even clinicians, sometimes they think that it is a white all people disease. And we need to change this. One thing that I don't know if everybody knows, but Parkinson's disease affects people all around the globe. This is not something that is, specific to Europe or the US, or it really affects people in every single country of the world. It is true that the prevalence is different. And we know that, for example, people in Africa have less Parkinson's, and people of European origin usually have more Parkinson's. And if we've known this for a long time, but we don't really know why. We don't know if it's because of the genetics, or we don't know if it's because of the different lifestyles, the food that they eat, the stress that we're the stress that we have in our lives. So that those are things that there's a lot of really smart people working on. But today I'm just going to talk about genetics. and the lack of diversity in genetics is very big. These are two initiatives that are ongoing in the US, PPMI and PDBP. So PPMI is a Michael J. Fox initiative that is trying to look into the genetics of Parkinson's disease. PDBP is led at the NIH and is looking into the genetics and also biomarkers. And you can see here that in those projects, in both of them, the participation of individuals that are from non-European ancestry is, and one is 4.3 and the other one is 5.8. So it's very, very small compared to, what we know the population is. And I put some numbers here just to show. So in the US, around 18.4% of the individuals that live in this country are from Hispanic or Latino origin, and 12.8 are Black African Americans. So that doesn't correspond with the percentage of people that are being studied. And minorities, especially Asians and Hispanics, are fastly growing. And we know that in some states, like, I saw some people dialing in from California today. In California, almost 50% of the individuals that live there have some kind of Hispanic root. So I think this is a big problem. We should see more representation of these populations in any study that it's ongoing. So studies in European populations, and this is just a very, very brief summary of what we know about genetics of Parkinson's disease, just to point out that all we know is because of the studies that have been done mostly in Europe and in the US with Caucasian individuals, so European ancestry individuals. And we know that there's at least about 20, depending on who you talk to, between 20 and 25 genes that can cause familial forms of Parkinson's disease. That is when we see several people in the family affected with the disease. And you can see here that if we take all the patients with Parkinson's disease, the number of individuals that have a family history is relatively small. Usually around 20% of all Parkinson's patients say that they have another family member affected. But again, there's about 20 to 25 genes that if you have a variant in those genes, you can get a genetic form of Parkinson's disease. And I'll just point out a couple of genes that are very important. One is LRRK2, which is here, also named PARK8. And then we have the gene GBA, which is a risk factor. It's not really a causal, because there are people that have variants in this gene that do not present Parkinson's disease. But these two genes are very important because there's ongoing clinical trials right now to try drugs that might be important for individuals that have variants in these genes. Because basically what the genes are telling us is they're trying to explain what the biology of the disease is, which is different between all of you. So every patient of Parkinson's disease, they have the same symptoms, but the reason or the way that they got there in the biology and what is going on in their bodies is very different. And the genes, the genetics are really telling us what the story of the patient is. And we think that if we treat the cause, not the symptoms, which is what we're doing right now, if we treat the cause, we'll be more effective to be able to slow down the disease. So these several clinical trials that are ongoing for these two genes are going to really try to be a proof of concept if we can do this effectively. Can we actually treat patients that have variants in these genes where we know the biology and we kind of understand what is going on in their brains to see if we can actually have a big impact on these individuals at least, which again is very small portion of all the Parkinson's patients, but it's a start. Hopefully we can get drugs for all the different genes. So this is the familial forms, but as I said, most of the patients do not have another family member, is what we in genetics call sporadic cases, right? So these patients are also very important because they're really helping us to understand what other genetic factors can be affecting the risk of somebody of developing the disease. And these are studies that we call case control studies, where we take a very big group of patients. In this case, you can see that we use almost 40,000 Parkinson's people with Parkinson's, And then we use about 1.4 million healthy controls. These are individuals that do not present any symptoms for Parkinson's disease, that are in some way matched in age and in gender with the patients. And when we look at the genetics of these two groups, we can identify things that are more common in one group than the other, which is telling us that these might have an effect on the risk. And we've done this with large numbers in European populations, which is, as I said, is mostly the people that participate in these genetic studies. And we know that there's at least 90 different variants that we all carry. A lot of these variants we all carry because they're common in the normal population, that increase our risk to develop the disease. So again, these are not causal. So if you have, some of these variants, it doesn't cause Parkinson's, but it does increase your risk. So together with other factors, for example, environmental factors, stress, exposure to pesticides, all that can actually increase your risk to a level where you will develop the disease. And genetically, something that we're now doing, which is very important, and I think this is going to really change the way we see healthcare and medicine in the future. And when I say the future, I'm talking in the next 2 or 3 years. I'm not talking about like 20 years from now. This is coming, and it is being done right now in cancer and other fields. And believe me, that is coming for Parkinson's disease as well. These are something that is called polygenic risk scores. So basically what we do is we take all these variants and we look all these variants in every single individual, and we know how much effect or how much these variants increase your risk. And we can do we can take a calculator, right? We have a statistical model that tell us what is the risk for a particular individual. And this is something that can be done when you're in your teens. You don't have to wait too long. You can do this in your teens, and then it will rank people in different risk levels. So these models will identify people that are in a really high risk to develop Parkinson's disease. And these cohorts are very important because we can use our knowledge to try to see if we can find things that will stop the disease or slow down the disease. So these polygenic risk scores are very, very important. And we now, with this data that we have right now, we can explain about 26 to 36% of the heritability. So that means that the genetic component of the disease, we can explain about 1/3 right now with all these variants. We think that if we go up to 100 or 150,000 patients participating, we will know almost every single variant that is involved in the risk, and our calculator will be much better, and hopefully we'll be able to calculate the risk for everybody. Obviously, Parkinson's is not only genetics, so there's going to be an environmental side that we're going to have to look into, and this will make our model perfect if we can put all the environment and genetics together to be able to do this. But with genetics, we think we can do a very good job of identifying those individuals with a high probability that they will develop Parkinson's disease. Okay, so this is very important, and again, this is going to really change the way that we see healthcare, because this will allow us to apply neuroprotective treatments of these individuals, and hopefully again catch individuals before they develop any of the symptoms, which I think is key in Parkinson's disease. Because when we see symptoms, you probably heard this before in other talks, when we see the first symptoms, the patient is really have lost a lot of the dopaminergic neurons, so it's really hard to recover from that. We want to catch people years, 10 20 years before they develop the disease, so we can start applying hopefully treatments that will slow or stop the disease. But I just wanted to say that this is not a problem with Parkinson's disease. The underrepresentation of minorities and underserved populations is not only a particular Parkinson's disease. This is a study that was published in 2016, looking at how many individuals all around the globe participate in genetic studies. And you can see, yes, focus on the 2016. We won't look how bad it was in 2009, where almost 96% of the individuals were European. We have made a strive, and we've improved. But if you see, the improvement is mostly this blue category here, which represents Asian individuals. If we look at some of the underrepresented populations that we have here in the US, like African Americans, which is the blue here, or Hispanic Latinos, which is this orange peach color, you can see that African Americans include less than 3% of all individuals in all genetic studies that participate, and is 0.5% of Hispanics. So this is a big problem for not only, again, for Parkinson's, but for any disease. And if we think that these polygenic risk scores, this genetics is going to really determine how we treat diseases in the future, this no representation of these populations is going to create a lot of problems. And yes, by doing modeling and estimating what we think we can know of all these diseases, we know that these polygenic risk scores, if we use the data that is based on only one population, we won't be able to predict accurately how the disease risk is in other populations. So just to put it in very simple words, if we only have studies for Europeans, and we can manage to have a model that is identify 100% who is going to develop the Parkinson's or not, if we take an African-American Parkinson's patient, this model will only detect about 25% of those individuals. It will miss 75% of them, just because the models do not include any data from these populations. And we know that both the genetics and also the other factors are very different. So is very, very important that we include these populations from now, because we now have already health disparities, and this is going to multiply by 100. If we start basing all our clinical decisions on genetics and we only have data for Europeans, the other populations are going to be completely left out of all these innovations and all these new treatments that we're going to be able to come out with. So this is a big, big problem. So I'll tell you a little bit about what I've been doing, which is really the important part here. So in 2006, I had a trip to Peru. It was my first really big international trip. I was invited. I was working on one of the big genes. That's when I was at the Mayo Clinic, and I was invited to talk to clinicians mostly. So this was the Movement Disorder Society, the Latin American Movement Disorder Society, which is now part of the MDS-PIS society. And after my talk, I gave this excellent talk about how there's a lot of patients that have mutations in this gene and blah blah blah. So clinicians came to me, a lot of them from different countries in Latin America, and they said, is there any data for Hispanics? Do we know if our patients also carry these mutations? And I was like, actually, I don't know. So I went that night, I went to the hotel, started Googling, and there was not a single paper that has studied these genes in non-European populations, which is a big problem. So talking to them at dinner, I said, look, I didn't find any information. We need to fix this. And they said, well, how can we do it? And obviously there's very little resources in some of these countries. So it's not like they have a geneticist on board that they can just do this for them. They don't really have the money to buy all the equipment and all the other stuff that you need to be able to do these studies. So I said, look, I'm at the Mayo Clinic, we have money. We're doing these studies, every day with hundreds and hundreds of patients. Yes, start sending me some of yours, and I'll kind of sneak them in my testing, and I'll see if I can still start to find some of these variants in your patients. So I start getting some patients. We started with only 2 sites. So we have 1 site in Peru and 1 site in Uruguay. That was the beginning of the project back in 2006. If you fast forward 14 years, now we've created the largest consortium of Latino patients in the world. We have 35 sites in 12 different countries, including not only South America, but now we include Central America and also the Caribbean. So we have many different sites now in anywhere from Mexico to almost the Patagonia, and then again, some of the Caribbean islands. And, I've been lucky to collaborate with many people. I'm just the coordinator, so I'm not really the boss of anybody. I just try to make sure that everybody gets along and we work together, for the same cause. And right now we have about 4,000 individuals in this study. About half of them are Parkinson's patients, but we also need healthy controls. So we've been recruiting a lot of healthy controls, usually spouses of the patients that are healthy, that we can include, and we can use them in those studies that I was mentioning that are case control, where we compare patients with people without the disease and see if we can find these changes. Because again, we don't have a lot of healthy controls from these populations that we can compare them to. And we know that there are differences. So we can't really use controls from the US for a study that is done with patients from Mexico, for example. So we need patients that are from the same area. Last year, we were lucky to get a Michael J. Fox Foundation grant that is going to allow us to recruit almost 5,000 more in the next 2 years. So our goal is to get to at least 9,000. I have higher hopes that it will get to 10,000, although COVID is really kicking me every day, not making my job really easy. But we are hoping to get at least 10,000. And we're starting to recruit now also in the US because we see that it's important to include Latinos anywhere, regardless of what they are. So we're starting to recruit also in the US. And we have a questionnaire. So we not only recruit or collect data, clinical data, but also demographics. And as I said, environment is very important. So we collect data on environment exposure and also cognitive impairment, because we are very interested in the non-motor symptoms as well as the motor symptoms, which I know that Indu is very interested in, and some other neurologists really want to see on this. So that's as much as I'm going to tell you about this project, but I also wanted to let you know that this project is not really about these sites, these sites sending me samples and I do everything, and then, yeah, sure, I'll put them in the papers, but that's not really the ultimate goal of this project. The ultimate goal is to, and this is something that we're also doing in the US, is to train people from these populations to work on their own data. So we've collaborated with many people. We have a very good collaboration in Peru with an Amerindian indigenous tribe that lives really close to Lake Titicaca. That is part of the Peruvian Genome Project. So we're working really closely with them because we need data from so Latinos are a mix of European ancestry, Amerindian ancestry, and African ancestry. So that means that to understand what is going on with Latinos, we need to understand what is going on in Africa, and we need to understand what is going on with the Amerindian indigenous population. So we're collaborating with individuals that are from those populations to try to understand what the genetics is. And then we are also in a lot of the countries, we don't really know what the prevalence is. And this is something that they always ask me every time I put a grant. They said, but is there more Parkinson's in Latin America? Is that why you are studying it? A lot of people still don't understand that we need to do this in all populations, not because it's more prevalent the disease, but because we need to understand what is causing the disease in these populations. It doesn't matter if there's only 2 people from that. We also want to understand why these 2 people are getting Parkinson's, because that can really give us an idea of why Parkinson's happens. So we have also an epidemiological study in Peru to try to see what the prevalence is. So we're going door to door to understand what the prevalence of the disease is. And this is done through a Fogarty fellowship that we have. But we also do, as I said, a lot of training. So we bring, before COVID, we used to bring a lot of scientists here to train in our lab. We train them, we send them back to make sure that we are training people so they can do a lot of the stuff on their own. They don't, my goal is that Michael J. Fox's goal is for him not to need to assist anymore as a foundation because the disease is gone. So my ultimate goal here is for them not to need me at all, and they can do all on their own. So I'll be here doing something else and they can do everything on their own. So we put a lot of emphasis on this, and we also understand that not everybody can come. So we do a lot of local training. Again, before COVID, I used to go there several times a year, and we do bioinformatics courses. We also bring neurologists to train clinicians. I do a lot of outreach to patients, education to patients, because I think is very, very important. So these are a couple of the last meetings that we've done in Peru. And then luckily, and as I said, I started this project in 2016. So those 4,000 individuals that I mentioned that we have right now in the freezer, or the DNA, we don't have the individuals in the freezer. We only have the DNA. That would be too cold. But so those samples were recruited with a grant from the Parkinson's Foundation that was only $150,000. That's all the funding I have from 2006 to 2016. So for 10 years, that's all the money I had to work on this project. And now everybody, I think, is getting on understanding at least how important diversity is. So now a lot of the institutions, foundations are investing a lot of the money to try to fix what it should have been done from the beginning, which is how we make our cohort and our studies more diverse. And the NIH is doing the same thing. There's a big push for this. So the Michael J. Fox Foundation came with a grant. So this is the grant that I was telling you about. where we're going to be able to recruit about 5,000 more individuals because of this. And we're going to start doing some genetic studies thanks to the science is going to be paid by the NIH. So I just got my first R01 at the end of last year. So the NIH will pay for all the science. And Michael J. Fox is paying for all the recruitment. So together we should be able to study all these 10,000 individuals that I was telling you that I'm hoping to get in a couple of years. But then private funding and a collaboration between private funding and the Michael J. Fox Foundation also allowed the creation of this global initiative. It's called the Global Parkinson's Genetics Program, and it's part of the Alliance Science Across Parkinson's Disease, the ASAP initiative. And this initiative, as you see here, the goal is to include about 150,000 new volunteers in genetic studies, and they want that at least a third, if not more, of those are coming from underserved regions. So you can see here in the map that a lot of the samples are coming from Latin America. We have a big project in Latin America. We have a project in Africa that is fastly growing. And then we also have a project in East Asia that is recruiting patients, and in India. So East Asia and India have their own cohorts. So we want that at least 1/3 of the samples are going to come from there, and then the other 2/3 will come from mostly Europe and the US and Australia. So this is a very important project where we're playing an important role. In fact, I was asked to lead the underrepresented populations working group. So you can see here that we have individuals for almost every country that I mentioned, or every region that I mentioned. And our idea is to be able to work together. So we collect similar data so we can do studies together. And we're right now doing the first genetic study, merging data from Europe, Asia, and Latin America to be able to do a genetic analysis and see if we can find new things that we wouldn't be able to see just by studying one single population. This project also has a lot of other components like large PD, and I think a lot of it was because we were pushing that this project should not be only focused on doing the research, but also training the researchers. So we have done a lot of courses online, and these are all free. So if anybody is interested in learning a little bit about genetics or neurology, there's great courses there that are in lay terms. They're not super professional. So I think a lot of them, people can take advantage of. So again, you'll have this slide so you can see the website here and you can go in there. And another thing that we're doing that I think is really, really cool is that, so one of the problems is that with all the training, we are sending all this data back to all the countries, but this is very large amount of data. So not everybody knows how to manage this data. They don't have a space to store the data, because that's something that people don't think about. It's like, I send you, terabytes of data. What do I do with this? And then sometimes they don't even have the power to be able to do analysis. So this group has created an environment in the cloud. So this is on the internet. So all the files, all the data is in there. And then they pay for users from the group, from mostly underserved institutions, that can access this database and do their own analysis, with the initiative actually paying for the money that it costs to run this analysis on the platform. So that means that it's kind of opening this up to everybody to equal the game, right? So no, we all have all the resources, so then we do all the analysis, but facilitating them to also come up with their ideas to be able to do their own analysis. And I think this is very innovative, and I think it's very cool that we're part of this. And then in the US, the Parkinson's Foundation has created the PD Generation Project, which has been ongoing for about 1.5 years with a pilot study, and now is opening up in more centers. And actually you can do this online. And the idea is to empower the patients. So the ultimate goal of this project is to give all the data back to the patient. Because most of the research that we do, we keep the data, and the patient doesn't receive any of the data because there's nothing really they can do with it. But here, they're only looking at some of the important genes that cause the familial forms of Parkinson's disease. And that data is given back to the patient through a genetic counselor. So an expert on genetics will explain the results to the patient once they do it. And what this means is that now the patient knows if they have any mutations. That means that obviously that means that the family members could potentially be a high risk for Parkinson's. So if they want to start doing some therapy or taking better care of themselves or avoiding some of the environmental factors that increase your chances to get Parkinson's, they can. But most importantly, they can decide to participate in clinical trials that are showing up that target individuals that have these mutations. So one of the inclusion criteria to participate in these studies, in these clinical trials, is that you need to know that you have a mutation to be able to participate. So this study will allow at least 15,000. I think that's the number that they're hoping to hit. 15,000 patients all across the US will be able to do this for free. And on a side note, what I've been trying to do is I want to make sure that we don't do the same thing that it has happened for the last 20 years, where an opportunity like this shows up, and then most of the people that participate again are European. So the Parkinson's Foundation created this Hispanic Parkinson's Advisory Council, or HPAC, which I'm leading, to create all the resources, translate everything, and make sure that all this can be done in Spanish. So anybody that is a Spanish speaker, doesn't speak English, can actually go through the whole process in Spanish from the first phone call to the genetic counseling. So everything is done in Spanish. We've translated all the consent forms, so everything can be done in the language, for Hispanics, which again, I think is very cool. And hopefully this will open the opportunity for patients from all backgrounds to be able to take advantage of this opportunity. And I think I have like a couple more slides to finish. So another diversity group that I'm involved is through the Pd Avengers. And if you are not a Pd Avenger, I hope that you will become a Pd Avenger. So Pd Avengers is a global movement of Parkinson's patients and caregivers. The goal is to have representatives all across the globe, and my working group is working on wellness and equity. So we want to make sure that everybody all across the world has access to the same care. So we're looking for what are the gaps, what are the needs in different parts of the world, and how we can help each other be able to make some of those things accessible. Maybe now that with COVID, we're realizing that there's a lot of things that we can do on Zoom, over the internet. So, you can do a little bit of physiotherapy, maybe you can do a speech therapy, a lot of things. So if somebody has a speech therapist, for example, maybe somebody else from a region where there is not a possibility to do this, can access those videos as well. So those kind of things. And this is based on a really cool book that I also recommend people reading, which is called Ending Parkinson's Disease, which really touches in a lot of the things that I've talked about, mostly on the environmental and things that we can do to prevent Parkinson's disease. I'm also involved in a working group at the WPC, the World Parkinson's Congress, which will happen in Barcelona 2020. So I'm hoping to see a lot of you, hopefully, if COVID let us, attending that meeting. I attended my first meeting in Oregon in 2016, and I fell in love with the structure. Having patients and caregivers attend a scientific, well, it's not really a scientific meeting. It's a meeting that includes everything, wellness and everything. To me, it was a game changer. I really love the experience, and I've been as involved as I've been able to with them. I went to Tokyo a couple of years ago, and I was named one of the scientific ambassadors for the program. So I'm working a lot with them. And then we also have a working group called Building Global Relationships, where again, we're trying to build networks of patients and patient support groups so they can share resources and they can share everything that they know, mostly to support regions where this is not available. So this is very, very important. And something that I'm very excited, this is a new thing that I'm hoping that we're gonna start doing with Laurie Mitchell and with Indu, and then a PhD candidate in my lab, which is starting to look at gender differences and why women get less Parkinson's, but also what kind of parts of the woman's health might actually be playing a role on the risk, because women, underrepresented is not only about, population, but women have been also highly underrepresented in research. And I think we need to change that. And not only that, but we also need to understand what specific things from the, all the things in life that are very different. Having kids, there's a lot of differences, and for a long time that has been completely ignored. And I think it's time now to start looking into some of these factors and try to understand better how this works. And I always tell people that when we try any drugs for any disease, are always tried in males, usually white males. So a lot of the drugs that we currently use, we don't really even know how well they work in women. We don't know how it works in African Americans. We don't know how well it works in Hispanics. And again, I think this needs to be changed in all levels, in research, in the clinic, from drug companies. Everybody needs to, put their little effort into try to understand all these differences and how we can provide equal care to everybody. So I think that's the biggest message that I can give you. So with that, I just wanted to thank a lot of our collaborators. I'm very lucky to work with incredible people. As I said, for a long time we didn't have funding. These clinicians all across Latin America were working on their free time to do research, to see patients for research, to send the samples, with their own money. I mean, it really was a team effort. And again, I'm here presenting, but I'm only the coordinator. I'm the referee. I just want to make sure that they get along and they don't fight, and we can move forward as fast as we can. So with that, I'll open it to questions, or if you have anything that you want me to talk about, I can expand a little bit more, because I went a little bit too fast maybe on some of the areas.
It was perfect. It was perfect. Thank you so much, Nacho. So proud of you. Wow. At the last few comments are about do you sleep at all, because you're doing so much, but we have some comments here and we can try to go through some of them and some questions. Some of them are a little bit specific, so I'll try to make them a little bit bigger. One was about the map that you showed and the redness of Canada, which as you know, I'm Canadian. And I think there's been, I've seen on Twitter, people worried about why there's so much, in sort of a lot of, patients with Parkinson's in Canada these days. One of the questions that, when you look at those maps and you see Africa and not so many patients, and, certain, countries where there's other physicians looking actively for these cases, is there a sampling bias? Are we not, looking enough in some of these places and have enough resources? So could you maybe comment on what your thoughts are on why Canada is so red?
Yeah, I think you are right. I think part of the difference in numbers, it might be that we're more aware in some of the developing countries of the disease, and we also have much more access. One thing that we realized when we started doing this door-to-door study in Peru is that, and this happens all across Latin America, is that a lot of the symptoms that patients have, for example, the slowness, the speech problems, a lot of individuals thought that that's just part of getting old. So they were never try to seek for a neurologist, because they didn't think that there was something wrong. And in fact, I remember one case, I was lucky enough to actually see this. They were given levodopa right there, and the family members thought we were like we just did magic on their grandpa. They're like, how is it possible that he's moving so well? I mean, and we tried to educate them to say, this is a disorder that can be treated. This is not just something about getting old. So I think that part is really probably part of the problem. And this is one of the reasons why we wanted to do this in Peru. About Canada, I'm not entirely sure why, to tell you the truth. It might be that there's better access to care, so a lot of people seek, and that means that you identify a lot. And I can see that maybe a lot of people here, if they don't have access, they don't count in those numbers because they were never diagnosed. So that could be probably the problem. But yeah, I don't have a good answer for that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a universal healthcare system. Maybe people have more access. Right. In the US, maybe people who don't have access don't get tested. There's a question here about whether insurance companies can access the data and then deny healthcare. I think that's a major problem with patients wanting to enter genetic studies. And I think, as you've mentioned, I think trying to educate people about these things and who gets Parkinson's. It's not just, older white males, it can be anybody. Even if you're old, you can get it. If you're young, you can get it. And then also the sort of sense of, these worries and fears about getting involved in tests, and then who gets the information, and is it going to change your ability to get insurance, health insurance and things.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that's a big question, and luckily with genetic testing there were regulations were put in place so that doesn't happen. So insurance companies are not they can't really access that data even if it's in your medical record, or at least they can discriminate you for having a predisposition for any disease. But that's a very important ongoing conversation as we generalize the use of genetics, and more people get genotype and more people get sequence, and people are already thinking that every single individual in the world is going to get genome sequence at some point, and is going to be part of your medical record. Because the more we know, it just makes sense. Yeah, right. For some of these things you want to know as soon as possible if you're gonna if you're a high risk, so you can really try to prevent some of the things. The other thing, and there are several studies about this that really surprised me as a geneticist, but doesn't surprise me as a human being, is that a lot of the studies have the opposite reaction. So when somebody knows that they have a genetic predisposition for a disease, instead of taking care of that, they just think that that's their will, that's what is going to happen. So they go the opposite direction and say, well, if I'm going to get Parkinson's, and if I'm going to have a heart attack, I might as well just enjoy my life. And then they do completely the opposite. So it's a double-edged sword having this data, because some people will say, oh no, I should eat healthier, and I need to do as much as I can, because unfortunately genetics we can't change. Right now we can't change. So the only thing for Parkinson's that we can do is, we can try to stay healthier, exercise more. I think wellness plays a really important role on trying to prevent. And we know that, helps a ton. And then, eat healthy and all those things. But every time I say this to people, I also said, even if you're not predisposed, you should be doing that anyways. So if you can't really do it on your normal life, even if you have a genetic predisposition, those people might not do it anyway. So yeah, so it's very interesting. But for the insurance part, right now individuals are protected, and anything that they do with research, as I said, that's not part of your medical electronic record. So there's no really record of that. And in fact, even if somebody comes into my lab and breaks into my lab, we have no names, or there's no way to identify who has what, because it's all de-identified data. So we make sure that we protect the integrity and the identity of all the individuals that participate in research. Yeah.
Okay. So basically, if you're doing something like the PD generation, which is available to anyone probably through the Parkinson Foundation, that would be confidential information. And then there was a question about what a genetics counselor does. Could you just maybe briefly talk about that? We may actually have a genetics counselor on later. I'm going to try to arrange that, because I think that would be a good person to have.
Yeah. I think that would be really good, because I think a lot of people don't really know what they do. And so they play an important role before genetic testing and after genetic testing. In fact, I think before genetic testing is the most important job that they have, because they need to make sure that individuals that go through the process, they understand the repercussions of getting genetic testing. Because a lot of people just go, and I remember, a good example is when people started doing 23andMe, yes, to get their ancestry results, and then all of a sudden they started to get data on breast cancer and all these risk factors that they maybe didn't want to know. And now you have this information. What you do with that information? A lot of people are really confused when they get the data, because they see a certain gene in there and they think, oh, I have the variant. And, people don't understand that we all have the same genes. It's just the specific variants. So just because somebody said, oh, you have LER2, well, we all have LER2. It's a specific variant, the one that causes the increased risk. So genetic counselors breach that gap. So they will explain you exactly what the risk or what the repercussions are from going through this genetic testing. What is that you're going to get out of it? What is that, the pros and cons? So you can make an informed decision if you really want to participate on this or not. And then after the fact, they really go through the whole results and explain exactly what it means. Because as I said, some of the variants are not causal. Some of the variants just increase your risk a little bit. And this has a huge impact on the results. So I think it's very important. But one thing that I would say is that some people go through genetic testing without, for example, thinking the impact that this will have in their kids. So if you go through genetic testing and you find that you have a genetic mutation that causes Parkinson's disease, some of them are dominant. So that means that you have a 50-50 chance to pass this to your kids. So automatically, once you get that result, automatically your kids will know that they have a 50-50 chance to get Parkinson's disease as well. And they might not want to know. So this is something that needs to be discussed on, in the family, and understand, all these repercussions. And when you do it, with the reason and having all the information. So the genetic counselors really play a huge role on this. Yeah.
Okay, that's good to know. Another question I think that's kind of it keeps coming up is so we talked about the lack of participation of certain populations in trials. In this, I guess you can maybe speak a little bit, because I know you do outreach as well and work with Hispanic community outreach, at least in the United States, and maybe in your specific community in Ohio. What is your sense of why, maybe like two reasons that people maybe number one don't participate in drug trials if they're in the Latin populations, and also maybe in genetics trials? What are the two main reasons, would you say?
So I think the main reasons are, education. So a lot of people really don't understand what we're doing. And, I get a lot of people coming to me and asking me, it's like, oh, if I donate my blood, what happens if I find my clone on the street? They think that we can use this to clone somebody. And that's not what we're trying to do. Neither we can do that. So I think education is a big part. And then also fear. I think there's a lot of fear on participating in research. With the Hispanic community, we find out that they think that, for example, the police might get access to this, and if they're undocumented immigrants in this country, they think that somebody could identify them and then send them back to the country. So there's a lot of fear. But I do have to say one thing, and is that it's not all on these populations not participating in research. It's not really all on their end. I think as the researchers, we don't make enough effort to include them. And this is something that, I've been telling people a long time. If you want to include Hispanics in your studies, it's not enough just to go to a translator and translate all your documents and have everything in Spanish. They have to be culturally appropriate. And we also need to understand that the needs for those patients might be different when they come to this study. For example, not all of them live close to a big hospital where the study is being done. So that means that the studies have to go where the patients are. You can't just ask a Hispanic patient to drive 3 hours to come to your clinic, because that's very much more convenient for you, right? Because maybe they can't. In our case, for Parkinson's disease, a lot of grandparents are taking care of their grandkids. So they can't take 3 hours on their day to do that. Sometimes they don't have the money to pay for parking. I mean, little things that we don't think about sometimes with our participants. Those are all barriers that are making them not being able to participate. So I would say that it's not all on their end. I think we also we have our own fault, and I think we really need to work hard if we want to be inclusive, we need to be inclusive on everything and try to make it as easy as possible for them to participate.
Absolutely. There's a question about like what type of sample are you asking for in some of these? Is it saliva, blood? What are we asking for?
Right. So PD generation, they do saliva. So because now you can do everything over the phone and telemedicine, they'll send a package to your house with the saliva kit, like the same thing that they do with Ancestry, like 23andMe or any of the other companies. You get a tube, and actually you do your sampling during a teleconference. So they explain exactly you how to do it. Although it has instructions, they want to make sure that you can ask any questions. Usually if we get individuals in the clinic, we try to get blood, just because the genetic material is much more cleaner if you extract it from blood, and you also get a lot more, because if you don't do the protocol right for saliva, sometimes it's contaminated with food, so you get DNA from anything that you eat that day, so it becomes a lot more dirty. but you can do that. But yeah, usually saliva or blood are the two things. For biomarkers, you do need CSF. I think somebody mentioned something about CSF there, spinal fluid. So sometimes we do require that if we do biomarkers, but for genetics, that's really all we need. In fact, we could even get hairs or something. You know, if you've watched CSI, you can get genetic material from pretty much anything in your body. Every cell has genetic information. So.
Right. So right now it sounds like PD generation is largely just for Parkinson's disease, not the Parkinsonisms, right? And then
Right.
people are talking about, they think that they may have been exposed to Agent Orange. Would it still be relevant to them? My sense is that a lot of these things are still important to, sort of, even if you think that you had an exposure and that's what caused you to get the disease in your mind, because there's sort of a genetics predisposition with some environmental interplay, it would still be helpful for pretty much, would there be anyone that you wouldn't want to do this PD generation sort of study on, or even, if you're Latino, like involved in the studies that you're doing with what you've been diagnosed with Parkinson's disease, would largely anyone be sort of a reasonable candidate for those studies?
I think everybody would, yeah, as you said, and in fact, one of the things that we're trying to understand, because we know Agent Orange, could be a big factor, but not everybody that was exposed had Parkinson's disease. So there's definitely other factors in there which we think genetics might be important. So not even participating in PD generation, because I said they only look at 7 genes, so they don't really look at the whole thing. But participate in genetic research in general, it will be really good, because we are trying to understand what part of our genetics predispose somebody that was exposed to Agent Orange to actually develop the disease, which might tell us a little bit about the disease itself. So I think, yeah, as you said, even if you think that you know why you got it, I think it's always important to participate, because yeah, there's always things that we can understand. Yeah.
That's amazing. Well, I'm so excited about your passion. Nacho, it's just amazing to see how many different projects you're involved in. And I'm not sure if you're the referee or the coach. I think you might be the coach. I don't know. I gotta figure out that analogy, but I think, this is really so great that you're doing so much collaboration. I think, my takeaways of 2020, and sort of our current sort of situation is that we can reach so many more people now through these sort of technologies, get the information out there. I think educating people, trying to empower them to get involved in things, because if they don't participate, then their gene pool, their voice, and for every single one of us, these genes matter. No matter, if you're Caucasian and 65 still as a male, if we get more people in the world to do these genetic studies, it can actually help that one patient even, right? So,
yeah, as I said, with all the data we have for Europeans, we can only understand a third, and that's for the population that we know the most. So as you said, yeah, absolutely. We need everybody to participate, everybody that wants to participate. And I will also say, just participate in research in general. Like, it doesn't have to be genetic research, but if you don't want somebody to poke you, or you don't want to give saliva, or you're afraid of giving genetics, participate in exercise or wellness, or, I mean, there's so many research and so many good things that are happening in the field to try to understand not only where the disease comes from, but what can we do to, prevent it and better care and stuff. So I think people should just participate in research in general, whatever they're passionate about. I think they should do it. Musical therapy or dance. I mean, there's so many to pick from. And I know that there's a lot of people that participate in a lot of them, which is excellent. And I'm very proud of people that have the time, to be able to do that. But yeah.
So, Nacho, I'm going to give you a couple minutes just to kind of wrap up. I think people are just sort of wanting to figure out like where to start if they're interested, because I think sometimes, like you said, driving to that big white, hospital with the, sort of expensive parking and the doctor in the white coat, and, they are trying to do so many things. And then, they get like 7,000 flyers in the lobby and they don't know where to start. So if they're interested in participating in genetic studies, no matter who they are on this call in the world, where would be some resources, and maybe where to start, sort of, if they're just sort of interested in understanding a little bit more?
Yeah, so I mean, if you're internet savvy, you can find a lot of information on the internet, but I would say the easier thing is to call one of the foundations. I mean, all the foundations, they give us the money, so they know who is doing what. A lot of them are leading some of these initiatives. So I think contacting them is always good because they can point you in the right direction. In fact, sometimes they will email me. They will forward me emails from patients that are interested in different things, and sometimes I talk to them on the phone. Sometimes they don't understand what they're signing for, so they want to have somebody to ask more questions. So foundations again know who the researchers are, what are we doing. So I think that's a very good point of reference, I think. And you can just call them. You don't even need to have internet. You can call them on the phone. They all have headlines. You can call. A lot of them have helplines in different languages, so you can call. If you don't speak English, you can call and get somebody that speaks Spanish to answer your question. So I think I think that would be my preferred choice, is to go to one of the foundations. Yeah.
That's amazing. Well, thank you so much for spending this hour with us. It was just really enlightening and just great to see somebody out there that's doing all this work and trying to connect all these people. I think gives hope to me, and I think hope to so many on the call here. And this will be available to watch again, because I do think you covered a lot of information, a lot of good resources in there. We'll try to link some of the resources as well with your talk, so people can kind of access those. And I'm excited to see, kind of as a doc who works at the VA, and I know you're passionate about veterans too, kind of including veterans in these sort of conversations with the PD generation and some of the Latin studies that you're doing, and in even the women's studies that we're doing. I think we can really sort of tap into some of these unmet needs. So really excited for, I think, the next 5 years. I think we can make some really big strides. And we talk so much about finding a cure and all these things many years from now, but I think we can each do our part to sort of move the needle right now. So I'm excited. So I'm going to pass it back to you, Andrea, or I can't remember, was it?
Yeah.
Just to give us our final way.
Yeah, so Dr. Mata, we always show our gratitude with turning on our cameras and doing a goodbye wave. And there's a lot to thank you for, all of your work and for teaching us about it today. So thank you for joining us. And if you scroll through, you can see all the smiling faces sharing gratitude with you.
That makes me happy. Have a great weekend, you all.
Yes, take care. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.